protection for pupils. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this part of the proposals? Thank you. I will call on Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've just got one brief question on this. So we've got that it's 300,000 savings. Do we know how many siblings, and are we tracking when these will enter the system so that we know if we'll come to the end of it or if it's going to continue ongoing for many years? Thank you.
Thank you. Those are good questions. Do we have a record of how many siblings are currently impacted on this and who would be impacted if we remove the protection?
Happy to come back on that one, Chair. So there's approximately 300 siblings currently in the system that are benefiting from protection on the basis of the policy change back in 2015, which was implemented in 2016. So as I was saying earlier, it's a significant period of time. And at the time of the policy change, as officers, we did say this potentially could go on a very long time given the size of some families. What we've seen though is a disproportionate impact because obviously those families that don't have they only have one child, there's no siblings, have been impacted more than those families where there's many children going to the same school, to the catchment school. And continuing to benefit, many years later, 8 years after the policy was changed, and the original child who benefited has long left school. So we know the numbers that are currently in the system. I'm not able to advise on the numbers moving forward into the system. We don't track those. We only track those that are based on eligibility on the present cohort or the September starters. We're not able to go beyond that, but there's a significant number of pupils that are benefiting at the moment where others aren't.
Thank you. Now I call on Councillor Timothy Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Take on board Robin's introductory remarks that over the years this authority has had a very generous provision for home to school transport, but obviously once you have something in place it's very hard to take it away, and it's going to cause uproar. And for me, I think this is the most concerning part of all the proposals, because I'm just really concerned it's going to split siblings up, obviously, and it's going to cause a lot of disruption for working parents as well. Given that we have in the past had a very generous school transport provision, how many other local authorities are proposing this in particular proposal 2 across Wales?
Thanks, Councillor Thomas. I think it's fair to say our policy has been quite unique in Wales. It's probably been the most complex home to school transport policy in terms of how it's been, how the policy is sort of derived, particularly the sibling protection, the in-receipt protection. I'm not aware of any other local authority that implemented a policy change with those, those principles in place. So that's why the policy proposals now for this year, given the strength of feeling there have been over the years and the perceived inequality over the protection afforded to siblings, as I've already mentioned, those families with just one child saying and reporting to us they feel disadvantaged because of that situation where a child could be living next door to another child going to the same school, and one could be afforded school transport where the other, because they don't have any siblings, are not eligible for school transport. So other local authorities are acting independently in terms of their own MTFS challenges, whilst there's some awareness across Wales, and Lindsay Harvey, a corporate director, recently chaired an Association of Directors of Education in Wales project looking at learner travel across Wales. Every local authority has a slight variation, let's say, in terms of its policy that either fits with the Learner Travel Wales measure requirements around 2 miles and 3 miles for primary and secondary. Some have post-16 eligibility, some don't. A handful of nursery eligibility, others don't. So ours has been very complicated as a policy, and it's been very difficult then to explain that policy, how it works to parents and to pupils, and how some are eligible and others aren't. And I've responded on numerous occasions to complaints and member referrals around the matter, and trying to explain how and why the policy doesn't apply to one child when it does to another. And it's been very, very challenging because of that inequality in terms of or perceived inequality in terms of the policy and how it's applied. So I hope I've answered to some extent your question.
Thank you. I'm going to move on, I think, and ask Ellie if she has anything to contribute.
I wanted to ask what support will be offered to both students, parents and schools if children have to move to be with their siblings in a new school due to them not being eligible to be on the bus, and so the parents want them to be at the same school.
So thanks, Ellie. I think the important thing to say is this policy proposal doesn't remove any parental rights around choosing a school that parents may want to choose a school for their child. So the way the policy and national legislation works is that essentially you're only eligible for school transport if you reside outside of the statutory distances of 2 miles for primary and 3 miles for secondary, and you attend your catchment school or the nearest suitable school, and that might be obviously Welsh medium or faith as well. So this doesn't suggest a splitting up of sibling groups. This is basically making the policy application equal for everybody across Bridgend. So there's no preferential treatment for siblings in the future, whereas there is at the moment. So, at the moment, it's fair to say there are still siblings who live in that 1.5 to 2 mile distance for primary, and the 2 mile and the 3 mile distance for secondary, who are getting school transport, whereas a child attending the same school is not. So I think what this policy is trying to do is not trying to impact families in any other way than saying it has to be an equal application. And what was very clear from the engagement that we did with pupils, in particular, pupils felt that was fair, that it was much better to having a very fair approach for all pupils. So you either fall within that eligibility threshold over the 2 miles, over the 3 miles, or you don't. And so this doesn't remove away any responsibility the parents have to choose a suitable school, but they have to accept then, if it's not a catchment school, there is no responsibility that we have as a local authority to provide transport. So I hope that helps a little bit, Ellie.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to come back at all on that, Ellie?
My question was more about, like, for example, last year, Bridgend stopped accepting students onto the bus to Llanharry, which is out of catchment. but they did so in such short notice that parents were scrambling to move their kids to schools like Pencoed or Llangynnaid, and I was wondering if that would happen again due to this rule, would the council provide any support?
Okay, thanks, Elliot. I think I understand that now. So what we've got is two different policy areas. So that policy change was associated with our school admissions policy. And whilst I understand perhaps that may have come as a shock to some parents, they were in a school that was outside of the local authority, and that change was made by the request of our Welsh medium schools within Bridgend through consultation. And the way that our school admission policy arrangements work is there's no public consultation. It's a consultation under the law with statutory consultees, which is generally schools. So the policy change was made 2 years in advance of the implementation of the policy. Yet, I think, as you say, there were some parents that were unaware of that change. What I would say is no child attending Ysgol Llanharry out of county lost their school transport as a result of that change. So all those who were already in the school continue to benefit from local authority provided school transport. What we've said, though, is that because the admission policy changed, no new child attending Ysgol Llanharry out of county would benefit from school transport, but parents still had the right to choose that school if they so wished. So we're allowing pupils who are currently in the school, were already in the school when that policy change was implemented, to benefit from school transport. But what we were saying, year 7 starters, for example, wouldn't then benefit from school transport because the Welsh medium schools within Bridgend wanted to ensure their own sustainability, and the local authority was essentially facilitating the movement of Welsh medium pupils out of the county borough to another local authority and supporting that agenda, which Cabinet then accepted as not the right way forward, and only now support school transport to Welsh medium schools within the county borough.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to call on Councillor Hugh David.
Thanks, Chair. One would assume with the legacy protection that would diminish over time. And I know it's probably a difficult question, but I'll ask it anyway. If that policy were to continue, are we able to forecast when that the cost of that legacy policy would diminish to an insignificant level? I don't know whether we've been able to look back over recent years and have seen a reduction in the overall cost, or is it difficult to discern a trend in the cost of this policy? Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor David. It is quite difficult, given the data, to do that tracking. The in-receipt protection has all but declined, and that was essentially because those pupils, when the policy changed in 2016, that's quite a long time ago now, have more or less worked their way through the education system. Whereas the sibling protection, as I said earlier, continues, and it is surprising how long that has lasted for many families. So I haven't got an indication at this time about how long it would take until all those pupils would lose that eligibility naturally, but I would suggest several years more. So I wouldn't put a number to it, but I don't think it would be next year. It would be several years down the road. But yeah, it's something potentially we could look at, but it's not something that at this point in time we've undertaken any analysis on.
Thank you. And can I just clarify, so if that removal of the sibling and in receipt protection, that would happen straight away or in 2025?
It would be from the the earliest we could implement any of these policy proposals would be September 2025.
So that gives time for parents to be aware that
Absolutely. And there's a lot of communication that we would need to do, as picked up earlier on in the meeting, to advise pupils, parents, carers, families, and obviously any stakeholders of our change of policy if it was forthcoming.
Thank you. Okay, and I think we're certain to pick on that in our recommendations. Okay, I'm going to call upon the Cabinet Member.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point. The 5 proposals are all not very palatable, but of the 5, this was the one that attracted 52%, nearly 52% of support. So the consultees who participated in the consultation process felt that this was a good way, or a reasonable way, I should say, of moving forward to meet our obligations to the MTFS. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll now go to the proposal 3, and I'll invite questions and observations on that. And I do want to just say that if the heads want to contribute, please indicate. That would be brilliant. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Timothy Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. I've got 2 questions relating to Proposal 3, but as I said, I've got to go at one, and I do have one quick question on Proposal 5. So with your indulgence, could I also link that one in before I go, please?
Oh, okay, yes, because I believe you have to leave shortly.
That's correct, yeah. So first, relating to Proposal 3, on the positive, starting off, first of all, is that there is a potential here that the proposals might actually make Welsh medium education more desirable for more people, especially, as you pointed out, Chair, at the primary level. I'm just wondering if that is something that's been recognised by the authority, and if so, do we have the potential capacity for increased medium and perhaps to a lesser extent faith school provision? My second question on Proposal 3, I note that of the remaining eligible schools, they've got Welsh medium, or a school, sorry, not a school, Archbishop McGrath, and the Bishop of Lambeth High School in Cardiff. Now, I accept that you've got to have equality with the different religions, with Roman Catholic and Anglicanism, but I'm just wondering, how many people are we busing to Cardiff? And really, is that really fair and value for money when we're taking away so many proposals within the county borough that we're proposing to still bus people to Cardiff? And thank you, Chair, for allowing me my Proposal 5 question. And this is as follows. I note that the transport budget allowance, if you like, is 45 pence a mile. And that's my understanding is that's in line with HMRC recommendations for mileage reimbursement. But I also note that in one full council meeting, it was noted by, I think, the deputy leader that was insufficient for our workers to be able to afford to do their daily jobs. And it was resolved by members of this council that should be increased to 46 pence per mile. So accordingly, if it's good enough for our workers, 46 pence a mile, shouldn't it be on offer for carers as well? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. If I can have answers, Robin?
Yeah. So the first question was around Welsh media education and the sort of the impact on the policy proposals around whether Welsh medium would be more desirable, and I would suggest that that's part of the policy intention. It's to protect Welsh medium education because we have a statutory duty to ensure that we are treating both the Welsh language and the English language equally. But also there's a statutory duty on the local authority to promote the Welsh language, and also the agenda around Cymraeg 2050 to grow the Welsh language. In our Welsh Education Strategic Plan, there are set targets in respect of the number of pupils in our Welsh medium schools, and in terms of the growth between now and 2032, to ensure that we are growing Welsh medium education, supporting the Welsh language and promoting the Welsh language. So do we have enough capacity? Well, we've identified significant investment in our school modernisation agenda, in terms of the number of places to meet our targets that are contained within the WESP. So again, we need to ensure and monitor over time that those places are sufficient. For this point in time, I'll provide you with that reassurance in terms of our wider strategy around growing Welsh medium education and the number of places in Bridgend. In terms of supporting faith-based education, Archdeacon John Lewis is our Welsh Church in Wales primary school. We don't have an equivalent Church in Wales secondary school within Bridgend, and in the past we've allowed pupils to attend the Bishop of Llandaff School in Cardiff, where they've desired to progress a secondary education in a Church in Wales school. I would say that many pupils now attend Archbishop McGrath Catholic High School as both Catholic and other faiths. And I would advise you that I'm aware of just one pupil that we're transporting at this point in time to Bishop of Llandaff School in Cardiff. So they're very small numbers. There's always been very small number. But what's important is we don't disadvantage those pupils who want to progress a Church in Wales education rather than a pure Church in Wales education in the nearest suitable Church in Wales secondary school. But as I say, many attend Archbishop McGrath Catholic High School as well. I've finished it off just on the basis of the 45 pence. I can't really comment, to be honest with Councillor Thomas. I wasn't aware of the 46 pence, but the 45 pence is the national sort of inland revenue recognised rate. There are implications beyond the acceptance of that rate. So I'm not qualified to say what they are, but I am aware, and I think we would need some legal advice in terms of whether or not we would be able to extend beyond the 45 pence. But at this point in time, that's the inland revenue limit. And if we to offer a higher rate, I think we would need to be very clear with parents and carers then about what the personal implications would be in terms of their own finances and what they would need to do, because there would be certain liabilities that we know potentially could be reflect on the local authority if we didn't communicate that. But we can seek some legal advice around that one. But at this point in time, we're just proposing to stick to the inland revenue rate of 45 pence as a cabinet recommendation.
Thank you. Okay, I will now go on to Councillor Amanda Williams, who has some questions.
Thank you very much, Chair. My questions are, firstly, can I ask what happens if there's no capacity at the catchment school and so the child is provided a place elsewhere? Would they then get transport if it is over if they're in nursery, but it's over the required miles? And I say that with having in mind that we're looking to potentially remove nursery placements. So obviously that will depend on that outcome there, and if there's potential for further saving, because if we move nursery placements, would we also be removing Welsh medium nursery placements too through the borough? And then my second question is, what sort of distances are these children travelling to their nearest Welsh medium school, please?
So just thanks, Councillor Williams. So in terms of the capacity, if there isn't capacity, nothing changes in terms of our offer. So where a child is eligible for school, if parents apply for a school place and there is no capacity, then it's the next nearest school as identified by the local authority. If that is over the distance, then for example, if it's nursery, it's over 1.5 miles, because the eligibility threshold for nursery is different to primary. If it's primary, it's over 2 miles, and if it's over 3 miles for secondary. So for any given scenario, if the local authority wasn't able to find a place for a child in their catchment school, transport would apply over the statutory distances in the next nearest school. What we do sometimes find is parents that want a school which isn't the next nearest suitable school, and in that situation, transport wouldn't apply. Then there wouldn't be any eligibility for school transport. But it's important to identify that for nursery, we're talking about 1.5 miles as the eligibility threshold, not 2 miles, which is the primary age threshold. I haven't got an average, but obviously what we're talking about here is the majority of pupils at the moment. I would say 95% of nursery pupils travel to Welsh medium and faith schools, and this policy proposal continues to support those pupils attending their nearest suitable faith and Welsh medium schools. So we're not proposing to remove eligibility for nursery pupils attending those schools because of a number of reasons I'm happy to go into, but hopefully that will address your question.
Thank you. And I also, it was very useful clarification that if a parent is not able to get their child into their nearest catchment school, you will then provide transport for that child. Is that correct?
Only where it's over the statutory distances.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the important differential, so it has to be over that threshold. So if the next nearest primary school is 5 miles away, then the local authority would provide transport on that basis.
Thank you. That's a really useful clarification, because I'm sure there are parents who are concerned that they might not be able to get their child into their favoured school, and therefore they would have to travel some distance, and they wouldn't be in a position to be able to do that. So that is really useful to know that. Thank you. Okay, I'm now going to call on Councillor Johanna Hwelin-Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question follows on from Councillor Williams's question, really, and it's to do with the non-statutory nursery education. It's stated in Proposal 3 that you intend to remove all transport from non-statutory education. My question is, have you considered the implications of this? Early years education is really important, especially in the more deprived areas, and this may lead to some safeguarding issues. And I was wondering if these are being considered and what is being done to mitigate the concerns, please.
Thanks, Councillor Hopkins. I think it's a very helpful question to ask, because it's important to identify that the proposal here is not impacting, as I've said, the cohort that currently benefits from this provision. So the majority of our transport for nursery pupils is those pupils attending Welsh medium and faith primary schools. So the nursery pupils go into those schools. There are very small numbers not attending faith and Welsh medium schools, and I would say it's about 5. So not massive numbers. Now the cohort, and that's the current number of nursery pupils. Now the cohort, as I've mentioned earlier, does change obviously every year. So your nursery pupils are unknown, because that's the point at which they start coming into the education system. So we have seen quite significant differences year on year in terms of the numbers who are eligible, and I'm aware more eligible eligible pupils this year in September 25 onwards, and that could change again from September 24, and that could change again from September 25. So it's a very difficult cohort to predict, but at the moment, just giving you that reassurance, the impact actually of this policy proposal on numbers is relatively small, given that altogether, I think we've only got about 60 pupils who are benefiting from transport, school transport, as nursery pupils, and the majority of them, because of that protection around Welsh medium and faith, will continue in the future to benefit. So relatively small numbers, hopefully low impact on that basis.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to go straight to Helen Jones because she needs to leave at 1 o'clock. Thank you.
I just wanted to thank you very much for your attention and the invitation today. It's obviously a matter that's very close to my community's heart. There's one last question, really. It's a very simple question, is that why has the policy been partially implemented in Maesteg as the first target area?
Thanks, Helen. It's a good question. I don't think it's just in Maesteg. The policy that was approved back in 2016, to some extent, has been partially implemented across Bridgend. I think, we did that piece of work in terms of, and I think what you're referring to is the available walking routes principally, because, that's the bit where we're saying around proposal 1, really. That's the one where it's not so much a policy change, it's actually a policy implementation. We effectively set in a point in time where we apply that policy, and that's going to impact on all those pupils that have benefited from a very generous offer. And I know there are some pupils, just to give you an example, in primary schools that are living 0.6 miles from their school who are in receipt of school transport. And it's that challenge and that claim from the communities, and we've kind of continued to make that some provision so that, to some extent, what we're saying now is, whereas we've not wished to detrimentally impact communities, and we've continued to provide transport, it has to come to a point in time where, because of the financial situation, we can say we can't do that anymore, and that's been compounded by the increased cost of transport, which, again, in my opening remarks earlier on, my introduction, I mentioned the significant change from 6.5 million to, which is likely to be 11.5 million pound spend this year. That's not sustainable. So whilst we could have made that change many years ago and drawn a line in the sand and said, we will now implement, we didn't. And I think we've just carried on trying to support communities and pupils as much as we can. But I think that now we just, the realization in respect to the difficult financial situation is that cannot continue any longer. And that's why we're proposing to Cabinet to consider some very difficult policy changes. But this one is more about implementation of an existing policy rather than fundamentally changing the current policy.
Okay, thank you. Are you content? And thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your analysis of
Thank you.
area. That was really, really helpful.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, I'm now going to call on Councillor Della Hughes. Thank you for bearing with us.
Thank you. So my question really is based around the impact of children in more deprived areas. And Robin just mentioned 1.5 miles there, so I might not be asking the right question here. But I'm just going to go on the school that I'm aware of. So, for example, Ogmaville Primary, you've got the Black Mill ward have always been bused into school from nursery up. So my concern here is we've got children in Lewistown who attend Flying Start, which they're able to walk to, and then they're going to have nursery transportation removed. We've got, there's low car ownership, there's the cost implications, which we all know and have said, but I just wonder really how people are going to get their children to school, because ultimately at that age, infant school age, whatever the parent's circumstances, whatever the child hasn't got control of that. And I'm really concerned about our more vulnerable children and families. A junior school child, we've got a lovely cycle track. They can cycle, they can scoot. And my concern is our youngest children and learners. And again, we know they're coming into school and their baseline is a lot lower than it ever has been. So if they decide then they're not going to take their child to nursery, or the attendance drops when they start reception, I'm just concerned. So I suppose it isn't really a question, but just my observation and concerns for the youngest and more vulnerable of our children.
Thank you. I don't know if you wanted to come back on that at all.
Yeah, thank you. I think, is really important points, and I think again, it's a difficult decision for Cabinet to make based on, some of the feedback. In terms of specifically around nursery, as I've already identified, I won't labour the point, but we are talking about relatively small numbers, and it's nursery is non-statutory education. Statutory education starts at reception, and at that point, there's different eligibility then in terms of distance and available walking routes come into play and so on. And I think pupils attending Ogmore Vale do benefit. Many of them do benefit from school transport at the moment, and that is possibly unlikely to change as a result of some of these policy proposals, other than for nursery and post-16. We'll come on to that later. So I think, just acknowledging absolutely many parts of the county borough, if flying start areas in significant areas of deprivation. Helen mentioned that as the head teacher acknowledging her community, and you're acknowledging another community within Bridgend, and there are many that are in the same situation or similar situations. So as we've said, we just, as a local authority, we need to monitor the impact of some of these policy proposals over time, and use whatever resources and powers available to us to try to mitigate some of the issues that are presented. But I think they are, very important points that you're raising. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring in the Cabinet member, and then we'll go back to Councillor Hughes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm in total agreement here with Councillor Della Hughes. I'm a Valleys councillor myself, so I'm very aware of the impact this is going to have on those who live quite some distance away. But I'm struggling as the Cabinet member to support schools with a statutory provision of education in terms of primary and secondary. There are numerous schools, if not all schools across the county borough at the moment, with deficit budgets, an issue which we'll have to address. And that is a statutory obligation on the authority to provide that education. When it comes to a point where there is a non-statutory obligation, then I'm afraid some very, very difficult decisions are going to have to be made. But again, I'll go back to what I said previously. The reassurance that I'll give members is this: we will monitor the impact this is having, not only on the individuals, but the families and the communities. And we will look at other ways, perhaps, as to how we can support the continuation of this particular service. It's a generous support service at the moment. It's non-statutory, and I'm afraid statutory will always have to take precedence and priority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and I'll come back to Councillor Hughes.
Hi, so could I just clarify then, Robin? So Ogmore Vale Primary, maybe for example, would just be nursery provision that would be lost. I was just of the understanding, because part of the Blackmill ward would now go, so that some of the children would live within the 2 mile radius, that transport would be lost. So I can only assume, is it because there isn't a safe walking route being identified, or have I misunderstood what you've said? Sorry.
Okay, so at the moment, the pupils who are eligible for school transport that attend Ogmore Vale, it's either because there's no available walking route, or because they live over the 2 miles. I can only assume it's possibly because of the lack of an available walking route. so that doesn't change. That's currently the situation, and that doesn't change as a result of this particular proposal. This particular proposal is saying that for non-statutory nursery, excluding Welsh medium and faith, there will be no longer any school transport provision. So that principally impacts English medium schools, primary schools across the county borough. So, as I've said, the numbers attending English medium primary schools, nursery pupils attending this, is very, very low. So we say in non-statutory anyway, we have to protect Welsh medium and faith, so the provision will continue because the numbers of schools is much lower. We've only got 4 faith primary and 4 Welsh medium primary schools in the county borough, so the choice is very limited and the geographical distances then are much larger. So it's nothing really changes specifically for Ogmore Vale as a school other than the loss of nursery transport provision to a handful of pupils who currently may benefit from it.
That's fine. Thanks, Robin.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll now go on to proposal 4, the removal of all post-16 transport. And I know that there are quite a number of questions and comments that want to be made about that. So if you wish to speak on this, please indicate, and I'll call you in turn. Thank you. Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, let me just find it again. So it was regarding the taking away of the free school transport to colleges, and it was sort of implying that people should go to the nearest college. Well, sometimes the nearest college is not the one that will offer the course they want. I mean, for instance, Pencoed College is the sports college. They are the only college who would offer a sports qualification. And you've got people from the valleys, from Porthcawl, from Maesteg, from all around. So how has the impact of this been thought about, please?
Thanks, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins. I think it has been thought about, and we are conscious of the impact. And Councillor Jones mentioned earlier on as cabinet member, obviously the difficult decision, and mention that cabinet will need to make, and potentially things like NEETs, not those young people not in education, employment or training, making a fundamental decision not to progress beyond 16, the age of 16, any education, any type of training, because of the inaccessibility from certain parts of the county borough. So going to college, living in Maesteg as an example, the nearest college course may be in Pencoed, in Bridgend College and Pencoed campus, how difficult that journey might be, how expensive that journey might be, and the impact of some of that decisions. But similarly then, for a young person, again, using the Maesteg example, going then into sixth form, maybe living 500 metres from this Maesteg school and being able to go into sixth form, but that not being an option for some young people, and the college option might be best for them. So it is potentially a barrier here, and we have identified, we are identifying the risks for cabinet. So it hasn't gone unacknowledged that what we potentially might have here is a disproportionate impact across Bridgend. The impact in certain valley communities and other parts of Bridgend, again, Porthcawl accessing Bridgend College, or the nearest college that might do their course. We have a very small number of young people attending other colleges outside of the county borough as well, because there is no option for them to do the college course within Bridgend. That's a unique situation, and we've supported that over time. But what we're saying here is that there will be no support for college learners. The only support will be for Welsh medium and faith learning as sixth form within our secondary schools. and that is, very difficult, I think, for many to accept. That those young people who do want that college education, this policy proposal, if it was implemented, would potentially be a barrier for them, and they may make alternative decisions around their future based on that.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Ellie for her contribution. Thank you.
The Youth Council are quite concerned about this proposal. We believe that it will increase emotionally based school avoidance, and through these barriers of not being able to attend the college that does the course for them, because even if they attend sixth form, a lot of the time people are going to colleges because their sixth form from the school that they've been going to don't offer that course. We're worried that the barriers will lead to them not attending further and not getting the qualifications, which would potentially then lead to more people not in education, employment or training. As well as this, we worry the buses are very expensive and not affordable on a 16 to 18 minimum wage, even with a bus pass. And so we are very worried about this proposal.
Thanks, Ellie. Chair, the only thing I would say is I think everything that Ellie has said absolutely resonates. It's come through strongly in the consultation responses. I think there's considerable value in what Ellie is saying, and I know that Cabinet will be cited on many of those issues when they consider this next week. And I know that Councillor George has popped his hand up and might want to jump in on the back of what I've just said on the basis of Ellie's comments.
Can I bring in the Cabinet member?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to respond directly to Ellie if I can. And Ellie, all I can say to you is I'm also worried. I'm also worried that there'll be an increase in NEET. I'm also worried that there'll be a lot of young people who feel disengaged. I'm also worried that there will be absenteeism. But the only other response I can give you is this. It's a non-statutory requirement. And I have to focus on statutory requirements. But again, the reassurance I'll give you is we will monitor, we will work with the youth and young people, see if there are alternatives. But my focus at the moment with the public purse that is available to me is to ensure that we fulfill our statutory obligations. But I am worried like you are, and I share your concern. And I'm sure in due course, we'll have lots of conversations together to see how we can take this forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I now call on Councillor Hugh David.
Thank you, Chair. In the contribution made earlier by the head teacher representative from Maesteg School, I'm sure I heard that Cardiff and the Vale College provide free passes to students living in Maesteg. Obviously, there is concern around the level of participation in college as a result of this potential proposal. But it is of interest. I'd like more information, if I can, from officers that some colleges do provide that transport free of charge. And we currently provide that. Is there a role for other colleges to provide that? And I have just tried to use that very robust research method of Google, but I don't want to rely on that as a way of working out if other colleges offer that. And is that part of the discussions that we can have with further education providers? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And before Robin speaks, it would be good to know whether or not in the pre-consultation period, whether talks have been made with Bridgend College and Pencoed College as to whether or not they would be able to provide bus passes for eligible pupils. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor David. I think that's a really good question, and it's not one I actually have the answer to. I'm not aware of any arrangement that Cardiff and Vale College has in terms of supporting its own students. I mean, as you'll be aware, as a local authority, we've always provided that learner travel support to college learners. So often misinterpreted as the support the college gives to actually its students, but rather it's the local authority that funds that transport arrangement. So I'm not aware that any of the colleges independently support school or college transport for non-eligible, but we have a duty. We've had a duty under our current policy to make transport arrangements for college learners. The proposal is that is removed in the future, and only Welsh medium and faith, secondary schools is protected. But we have concentrated, on college learners, but there are pupils in sixth forms in our other secondary schools, which will also, under the policy proposals, lose entitlement as well. But I'm more than happy to speak to our colleagues within the FE sector to try to understand how they support their students at the moment, and whether or not there is opportunity in the future for some sort of support independently through colleges. And I think that would be an important communication point that we would want to make collaboratively over the next year or so, if the policy was approved by Cabinet, what the alternatives are, and what colleges may be supporting independently the transport arrangements for students affected by this proposal, if it was forthcoming.
Okay, thank you. We're going on to Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, I'm out of breath now. We're talking about post 16, and I couldn't do my maths earlier when I put my ticket on the car. So I've got some concerns with regards to this. I touched on it previously about attendance and affordability of going to school. So my concerns on this and the questions from this, and I'll give an example, is my son today was in school for 1 lesson for 1 hour. So he's lucky. I live locally. He goes to the local school. I can drive and pick him up, or his grandparents can. But there'll be a lot of children who won't be in that position. So their parents aren't in the position to take them. And when you come into post 16, your A levels, you're not in all day, every day, depending on what courses you do. So firstly, how can you work with schools so that we can encourage children to come in for their learning, and so they're not coming in for a day here for an hour, another hour on a Wednesday, for example, 2 hours on a Friday? How can you condense it to reduce the cost? Because if they're only coming in so many days, then that will reduce the cost to them. And also, have you already looked at, and are you content that there are regular buses that pass each of our schools and colleges? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously we've acknowledged the potential risks around attendance and some of the impact around affordability of families and able to support young people in education beyond year 11. I think in terms of some of the question, the question you've got around timetabling, I think that would be something for individual schools to potentially support and address. It's not something we as a local authority could enforce. I think there's a potential communication there, but timetabling is a very complicated area that affects the whole school, and I think it would be wrong of me to suggest that would be a mechanism which would be a quick fix, because I don't think it would be, but it's certainly acknowledging that when our sixth formers are in school, they go in on the same buses as those of statutory school age, and come home on the same buses as those of statutory school age, and there's no alternative for them during the day at the moment anyway. So if they're in for an hour, if they have just one lesson today, they have to wait until the bus takes them home at the end of the day. So at the moment, I'm not suggesting they get home in a different way, but at the moment, that is the arrangement anyway. And again, I obviously acknowledge your points you were making around regular bus routes across Bridgend. We know that they've been affected post-pandemic and been supported by relative grants by Welsh Government to ensure that public transport providers are in a position to offer services, but some of those services have been impacted, and there's reduced numbers of buses, albeit the routes are more or less, I think, the same. There's a reduced service on many of those buses. Again, that's something around the market, nothing I can impact. I can only work, obviously, with colleagues within our communities directorate within highways who have direct liaison on a regional basis with Welsh Government to ensure that those bus services are in place. But I think acknowledging the points you're making, it is a more difficult world in terms of public transport, and this policy proposal. It's not an ideal situation, but as Councillor Jones, Cabinet members mentioned, it's a non-statutory provision. So I won't say any more than that.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to come back on that?
Yes, please. So I get that it's a non-statutory, but we are all here as members, and we are corporate parents. We have a corporate parental role. We have a responsibility to the young learners in our local authority, and also I'm due to raise it shortly in this report, the well-being of future generations. That's law, that's a requirement we have to adhere to, and I don't think this is looking after the well-being of our future generations simply by saying, well, that's for the school. We're going to make this decision. Now it's for the school, who are already got cut budgets, to pick up, because I know schools are already paying for taxis to taxi children. They don't have the funds for that. So there's children already losing out because there's not the options available for them for A-level, because schools simply cannot continue to pay for these taxis. But if you're going to make this proposal to Cabinet next week, I would expect in the papers for you to go back to Cabinet to say, we've looked at this and we are working with schools, not passing the buck on to schools, and also that we have got the bus timetables. We know which schools this is going to impact. Is it going to impact our most vulnerable learners from the valleys because there are no bus routes for them? Because that would be a key part, I think, in any decision making here, because this report talks about all children being equal, but they're not all equal if we don't know which children are going to be affected. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I don't know if you want to come back on that?
Yes, please, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Williams. I think we are acknowledging in the Cabinet paper next week the impact in respect of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. In terms of individual schools providing taxis themselves independent of the local authority, I'm not aware that is a school transport arrangement, because if there's no eligibility for school transport, it's not something that schools can or should then be providing support around. It may be a unique situation associated with potentially with examinations. I'm not able to comment any further than that, really. And and as a local authority, we're certainly not passing the buck. We will work very closely with our schools, as we always have done. Is a partnership. So just provide you with some reassurance around that. But we are not acknowledging the impact of this policy proposal. It will have an impact. And that's all I can assure you is, as Councillor Jones, a Cabinet member, has said quite a few times today, the monitoring is important and how we react is important. I'll pass back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go on now to Councillor Johanna Llewellyn Hopkins, please.
Yeah, it was just the second part of the question I asked earlier. So you've mentioned that you're aware that this policy may lead to increased NEET children and disengaged children. This is our future workforce you're talking about. If we can't get enough qualified people in the borough, then we're going to be employing from outside of the borough. And I was wondering, had you thought of a different means to do it, such as means testing the parents? I mean, I've had a child that's been in Pencoed College for 2 years. We've got him there. We've been able to get him there, bring him home. I've got another child who attends a local sixth form, which is walking distance from the house, so that's not an issue. But I'm just worried that it's more disengaged and the ones likely to become NEET that are going to be massively hit by this, and they're the ones whose families cannot afford to get them there.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, a very valid point again. I think it's not it's not something we're proposing a means tested approach, but I think that would be something that if Cabinet wish to pursue consideration of something like that in the future, that would be another policy proposal which we'd have to work through. But what I have identified is the opportunity for those parents or families, rather, perhaps in a disadvantaged situation financially, the ability to utilise the education maintenance allowance grant, which is available to individuals post-16, which could support them via could support them on school transport. I believe that's £40 a week. So there are benefits available specifically to support post-16 education, whether or not that money is used for books, whether it's used for any other type of facility to support the learner, or whether it's used for school transport. It is an opportunity. So there are other mechanisms and other benefits available to families who are in a financially disadvantaged situation, which again could potentially compensate. But I go back to acknowledging perhaps that in some parts of Bridgend, the situation is very difficult, but also the public transport situation is very different as well. Yeah, I haven't got all the answers to all those questions, and I haven't got the solution, certainly not.
Okay, thank you. I think we have touched on the educational maintenance allowance, and it would not cover the cost of a weekly bus pass. But you'd also be penalising those children who have to travel some distance. And we've already heard from Helen, her teacher, about how already in Cairo they have difficulties with attendance. And if those children would prefer a college education and they can't get that either, then basically it's better for them financially just to sign on, go on income support and not to pursue education when they're 16. And I do find that a rather retrograde step. So thank you for your contributions there. I'm going to call on the Cabinet Member next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think Helen Jones raised some very interesting points, which certainly would be subject to future debate and discussion, and looking at alternative ways forward. And I think going back to Councillor Johanna Llewellyn-Hopkins's point, yes, there will be families who will be acutely disadvantaged, but I think that's where we need to look at other directorate support for those families to see if there is a way in which we can support perhaps a post-16 member of the family receiving travel support. I'm not saying it's in place, but it's worthy of consideration, and it's worthy of identifying what the need is, looking at options to support and getting that options of support in very quickly. But if I may, Chair, I want to go back to Councillor Amanda Williams's point that she made, and she suggested that there was local arrangements in place with schools for post-16 transport. I'm curious to explore this further, because school heads across the county borough are presented to me that they're struggling with deficit budgets. And I just question, is this the right use of budgets? if that is being implemented across the county borough. I only say that on the back of what Councillor Williams has just suggested to Scrutiny, and I'd like to explore it further. If it is happening locally, I'd like to explore why is it happening locally, what is the criteria in place, what are the bespoke arrangements, because that would suggest to me we are heading very, very closely and cleverly to a postcode level of service for children across the country, and I want to stay away from that. If anything, learner travel should be coordinated from the centre with Robin Davis and his team, and if there are local arrangements in place, then as I say, I want to explore that further, and I will question whether or not that is the proper use of school budgets. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll go back to Councillor Amanda Williams on that. I don't know whether it's as a result of things like partnership agreements where one school will do an A-level there, and then children who want to do that A-level will be bused to that or taxied to that school. I don't know if it's as a result of that or some other. So I'll go to Councillor Williams.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, that's exactly it as far as I'm aware. And I don't agree that I agree with you, it's not the right way to spend the school budget. Schools don't want to spend that money either. They've got better uses of that funding, but they're being forced to pay. So far, no money has come to them. So I don't know what the agreements should be, but schools, I know, are footing the bill in some instances when they didn't believe that they would be footing the bill. And obviously that's coming out of already stretched budgets. Thanks. Okay,
so I'm going to come back to Robin on this then.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think it's important to differentiate here. The arrangements that is in place in terms of partnership between secondary schools in terms of subject choice has been going on for a very long time. That is nothing to do with home to school transport. That is a natural arrangement where subjects may be available in one school that pupils wish to pursue, and the schools participate then in making arrangements for transport between those schools. So that isn't something which is impacted by any of the policy proposals here. That collaborative approach in respect of particularly up to post-16 education is really important, and that is unlikely to change as it shouldn't change as a result of these policy proposals. But obviously that arrangement does cost money, but that is a separate arrangement that individual schools, as you said, Chair, through that partnership arrangement make and have it had in place for significant periods of time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'll go to Councillor Della Hughes, please.
Thank you. I suppose, again, it's really a statement, and as Robin said and Martin has said, there isn't a solution here today, really, because we're at the point we're at. But I just want to say again, really, the only residents who contacted me about any of this consultation were of parents of children who are going to be going to sixth form. So I feel it would be remiss of me not to mention it. One family in particular, 4 children, one just going to sixth form, some in primary, couldn't transport the child to sixth form because taking children to primary at the same time. And the family, they don't earn a lot of money, but it's over the amount for the educational maintenance allowance. And when I had a look, First Cymru bus pass is £75 a month, but it says for 16 to 21-year-olds, it would be £49.50 with a learner travel pass. So the only question, I suppose, is that the only thing that a child in sixth form or college would be eligible to have should we cease the transport for them. So I suppose it is, again, it's just a statement, but I appreciate what Councillor Jones has said in regard to statutory responsibilities and looking and monitoring, and there being ways of working across directorates and support from maybe social services or I don't know, so that our most vulnerable families and young people, again, same as the other provision, it's my biggest concern. As we know, a good education is the best way for a child out of poverty. And, I see children all the time locally to me who are, are thriving and are doing really well. And very often they've got difficult family circumstances. But I just think we know there's going to be big changes, but it's just how we try our absolute utmost that our most vulnerable children, and ultimately it's the children, because they, especially younger children, because whatever choices their parents make is not that child's fault, you know.
No,
So
that's right.
so I just feel that it is really important. I'd like to thank the Cabinet member for his commitment to setting up a group to monitor this, because we all know there's going to be huge impacts. We know there is. And unfortunately, I wish I had a solution or an alternative, but I think we can all see that there are very few at this time. But just like to thank Councillor Jones and Robin for their input. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll just go to Councillor Amanda Williams.
Sorry, I put the wrong microphone on then. Yeah, sorry, I had two last questions on this proposal. So the first one is, so we've discussed the impact it would potentially have on accessibility to post-16 education, and I wondered, was this the factor in the Cabinet's last decision on whether to progress with removing post-16 transport? Because obviously the last time they looked at this, they decided not to. So that was the one question. And then from the document that came with the report, it was clear that some parents were suggesting that there was a split between the Welsh and English medium, and because it was being continued for Welsh medium, they felt it was discriminatory. So I wondered if we could have assurance that we wouldn't be open to any legal challenge if this was to go forward. Thank you.
I'm happy for me to go back, Chair. Okay, thanks, Councillor Williams. Yeah, in terms of why Cabinet didn't make the decision last time, it was fundamentally to do with the announcement by national government, by Welsh Government, of the review of the Travel Wales measure, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting now, some time ago, that wasn't forthcoming. So the proposals weren't progressed on that basis. So Cabinet essentially deferred that decision to a point in time, a later point in time, after the outcome of that review, which didn't report in the way I think across Wales we expected it to report. In terms of the feedback from the consultation in respect of Welsh medium and discrimination against the English medium education, I can't provide you any assurance that there wouldn't be potentially a challenge, but we don't see one being forthcoming. Our legal duty is around the promotion and supporting the growth of the Welsh language. There isn't such a provision in respect of the English language. So I think in terms of the policy proposals, as they currently stand, they are very robust in terms of our legal duty. That's not to say somebody may in the future consider potentially a challenge, but that's not something I can predict. But that's all I can give you is the reassurance that the policy proposals as they stand have been tested legally, and we are very, I'm reassured, and I would reassure you that they are robust proposals.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I'm going to conclude that looking at that proposal, and we'll move on to looking at proposal 5, which is the offer to parents and carers of pupils with additional learning needs the option of a transport budget providing a mileage allowance of 45p a mile. So have we got any comments or questions on that? Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call on Ellie O'Connell.
I've got a few questions on this. My first one being, do we think that 45 pence per mile is fair compensation for parents who may have to change their working schedules and reduce their working hours in order to take their additional learning needs children to and from school? My second question is, what about parents who are also disabled and the disability is hereditary and as a result they can't drive? What would we do then? And I can't remember. I had a third question, but I can't remember it, so I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Some really important questions. I think we've picked up 45 pence previously. I mean, what I would say is this is a proposal as an offer only. So this is as an offer. It's only something that would that parents, if they desired it, would potentially accept. We're not forcing this on any parents. As an offer, there's a choice. You either say, yes, I'll accept it as a parent or a carer, and I'm happy to, accept the 45 pence a mile and take my own child to school, or not. And if you say, no, I'm not interested in that as an offer, the local authority will continue to provide transport as it currently does. So we're not forcing this on any families. We're offering it because we do have a handful of families at the moment that have benefited from this as a way forward with their child and have said to us, I'd much rather take my child to school myself. Is there anything you can do for me financially? And we've provided an element of financial support. This is making that more of a wider offer in terms of some of the very expensive transport provision we have in place for our ALN pupils. And, we've had many conversations with parents, carers over the years where we've, seen this as a potential way forward. But what is important here is this is not being forced upon parents or carers. We say to them, would you like this? And if you don't, that's fine. We're more than happy to maintain the status quo.
Okay, thank you. That's a helpful clarification. So it's an offer that is available or could be available, and it's where parents are unable to take on that offer, then transport will be provided in the wages now. Thank you. That's very helpful. Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much. That was the first part for me to clarify, because I think your report says that some parents were unclear about that. So we've got that clarified, that we're not taking away any transport for children with additional learning needs. But from that, I know we discussed earlier in the pre-meeting, it might refresh Ellie's memory then, when I said about school lockdowns, when you're locked down at the start and the end of the day in a lot of the normal schools, and if you've got parents who take up this offer and their child goes to a mainstream school, how are you going to accommodate that vehicle then if they need to have access to a disabled space or closer parking to the school? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Very important points, and I think we would need to work very closely with schools on that basis, because I do acknowledge that many schools have those lockdown arrangements in place where there's limited traffic movements. But I would just reassure you, as I said, there are some parents that currently do benefit from this arrangement. I think it won't suit all parents, and I think there's many parents out there that need to get to work, wouldn't see this as a way forward. But for those who do see this as a way forward, we would need to then obviously work to ensure that it's safe to do so, that that there is access arrangements in place, that there's suitable provision. So there's something that as a local authority we need to work up, particularly over the next year before this is fully implemented in September 26, if Cabinet make the decision to progress this particular proposal. But some really important points, so thank you for those.
Thank you. I call on Ellie O'Connell.
So if I can ask you to clarify, will the council be making more disabled spaces in school parking areas to accommodate these children's cars, these children with additional learning needs cars, or what is the plan for the space?
Thanks, Ellie. I can't give you that assurance only because the responsibility for safety within schools rests with the head teachers. So we would need to work with schools, as I've said, to ensure that there's perhaps some sort of arrangement in place now. But not all our schools have available disabled parking bays. Very few of our schools actually are provisioned with suitable disabled bays. So we have to accept, for some schools, parents taking their own children to school, it becomes their responsibility outside of the school grounds potentially as well. So, but I suppose that would be no different to parents taking their child to the cinema or anywhere else. So we couldn't provide assurance that we're going to be making facilities available in every single school for this arrangement. But where facilities do exist, we will be working with schools just to try to understand the impact of this policy proposal, the take-up of the policy proposal, and the ability of schools to support it in some way. And that's only in some way. So I can't give you assurance that 100% of pupils transported to school in this way by parents who may have a disability or additional learning need would be able to access a car parking space within the school grounds. I can't provide you with that assurance because that's just not practical. But I would expect parents to understand some of those barriers before they sign up to the agreement. And for some schools, it may be more of an issue than in others.
Thank you. I think it would be useful at this point to bring in Adele Thomas, who's a head teacher at a primary school.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invite today. To be honest, a lot of the questions I had have already been addressed. I had two hats on today as a previous head in my stake, so lots of my queries around some of the areas that have the biggest impact, but obviously Helen Jones spoke really eloquently and detailedly earlier, but I just wanted more of a statement really that it was reassuring to hear Robin say about how closely he'll work with schools to mitigate some of these issues. It was a point that you made earlier, Robin, very briefly about the discretion, because as a primary school, as you've mentioned, we have very low numbers of school transports being provided by the local authority. It fluctuates as for all my colleagues, but when it is, it tends to be those ALN and vulnerable children. So we would want to work with you to make that case on that case-to-case basis to make sure those families who are in need, and to be honest, often in crisis, get looked at individually to meet their needs. And that's where a primary school view would come from, because it would just be very rare, but it would, when we asked for it, it would be really important. And that we do work with you already. Some of those points, Ellie, you made a really good point about disabled access. We've had that issue in school, and we were able to reach out to health and safety and make those changes in order to meet those families' needs. But we did work with the local authority to do that. So that's reassuring to know that will continue.
Thank you. And I am aware that there are varying parking issues around different schools, and some have car parks within them, but others don't. But also that children who have additional learning needs may or may not need support to get from the car to their class, and some children would need support to do that, whereas others would be able to manage that without any additional support. Though presumably that is already covered by the agreements that they already have with the local school transport. Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Hughes, and that will be the last comment on this part of the proposal.
It's only a quick question, and I suppose it is, if the figures are not there for a reason, I realise that. But do you have any idea, depending on, say, a certain percentage of take-up of this from parents, and do realise that children have a wide range of needs who need transportation? Do we have any idea at all of what cost savings could potentially be if parents were to take up the offer?
Thanks for the question. Really good question. I don't have any indication of take-up, and I think obviously the first year of offering this as a policy offer would be very important to understand that take-up. I think the second question around cost savings is quite an interesting one, because part of the reason for the policy proposal goes back to our responsibility to ensuring that children, young people are transported to school in the least stressful situation possible. That obviously that's the beginning of their school day, that potentially impacts their learning. And some of those conversations that we've had with parents is about it's what's best for my child to get them to school. I'm the best placed to take my child to school. So it's somewhat about well-being. So some of the cost issues, it's not necessarily going to give us huge cost savings. And I'll just give you a scenario. If I have currently a taxi with 3 ALN pupils on board, and one parent says, I want my child, I'll take them into school, I'm running that taxi for the other 2 children, but I'm also then paying the other parent 45 pence a mile. So there's potential cost increases associated with certain contracts. Now, it might be that that's offset by one taxi, as I could give you an example, which is currently costing me £36,000 a year to run one taxi for one child. So on that basis, I only need one child to come off a taxi to make significant savings. So for some pupils, it'll be efficiency savings for the local authorities, and for other pupils, it'll be increased cost for the local authority. Overall, I can't give you an indication of the quantum of how that works out, because it depends on who's who and who picks up the offer. But I think has to be some acceptance that part of the reason we're doing this is also to support the well-being of our most vulnerable learners when they go into school, and the best place for them is often with their parents rather than in a taxi. Go into that school. So, but we'll have to wait and see. I know we've used the word monitor quite a lot this morning, but that's all we can do, I think, for that first year to try to understand what that picture looks like.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we've looked at that, and I think we'd now go on to, we had no questions to make about the learner travel consultation and findings, so we just want to have some questions on the general overall financial situation. So have I got questions on that, please? Councillor Della Hughes, is that a legacy hand or is... Yeah, right. Okay, Councillor Hugh David, please.
Thanks, Chair. It obviously, as the cabinet member and the group managers described, this is a decision driven by the medium-term financial strategy. I wanted to ask if there are any other alternative proposals to save the money that's identified in the MTFS to these set of proposals before us today. Thanks, Chair.
Are you happy for me to come in? Or I don't know if Nicola wants to come in.
Yeah, I just wondered if you wanted me to come in.
You.
I mean, members will be aware there are a considerable number of savings set against this directorate. This is one of them. It's a very significant saving that we have to make, but we do have other proposals that we will be coming forward with and discussing with members and scrutiny members in the near future. But yes, as to say, we haven't got an alternative to this proposal, but we do have significant other savings to be made with other proposals. So unfortunately, if you look at our current position within the directorate, our current overspend is almost entirely due to school transport, and it's for this very unfortunate reason really we're bringing these proposals to you today.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much. I've got some questions on the previous bit, which was just after section 5.1, well, section 5 and section 6, but on the finance, firstly, I've just forgotten my question. I was going to ask, it was linked into what, can I come back to the finance one and go to the other two while I just remember it, sorry. Yes, so on the wellbeing one, I touched on it earlier, but on 5.1 it says long-term
and reduction in emissions. So that's one of the benefits. But what it doesn't say in the well-being of future generations is it doesn't mention anywhere about the impact it will have on our 16 plus. So I think that report should have had something in there acknowledging that it is going to have an impact on potentially the future well-being of 16 plus. But when you're talking about reduction in emissions, then that goes into 6.4, and it says the local authority promotes the use by school transport operators of ultra-low or zero emissions vehicles. So my question here was, how many ultra-low or zero emissions vehicles are there, and what types of vehicles are these? Thank you. And while you answer that, I'll remember my finance one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Williams. Sorry if I jump in, Chair. So in terms of the emissions, part of our procurement approach is to ask operators when they bid for our contracts to identify how they can contribute to our net zero carbon responsibilities. It's actually the highest scoring question in terms of weighting that we ask as an independent question. I mean, most of you will know that the majority of school transport vehicles are not ultra low emission. They're big buses that use diesel engines, and the majority of our operators don't operate ultra low zero emission vehicles or electric vehicles. They do get extra points in terms of scoring against our procurement for those types of vehicles if they do have an agenda around changing their fleet. However, we don't normally see a significant investment by those operators because of the cost. And I think the thing we have to remember is we're trying to keep costs down. The operators know that we want to keep costs down, and if they were to invest heavily, just like buying an electric car, it generally costs a lot more than an equivalent car with a combustion engine. So it's a very difficult one. It's a bit of chicken and egg. But I think, we'll continue to encourage our operators to invest to support a more sustainable future for future generations. But at the moment, we generally don't have a school transport fleet where there's significant investment in ultra low carbon emission vehicles or electric vehicles of any kind. But over time, we do hope to see some sort of changes. So I haven't got any numbers for you there, Councillor Williams. And obviously, we'll react to that agenda in the future and continue to invest and encourage investment where we can.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thanks, I remembered my question now, and it links on from that actually. So we've got on table 325 contract types of buses, minibuses, etc. So if all of these proposals go ahead, those contract types will no doubt reduce. There will be less buses, for example. Will that reduction in services result in increased costs for the services that are left, for the contracts that are retained? Because I remember when I did GCSE business studies, we were always told if there's less, it's all about supply and demand. And if you, as a business, have got less contracts, you're going to put up the price of your contracts to cover the costs that you're then losing. So I just wondered if that's a risk for this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Williams. Again, another good contract. A good question around contracts. I think the issue is our operators have struggled to meet our requirements in terms of demand for school transport. The market has been depressed for quite some time with a lack of drivers in particular. So we have struggled to get school transport to meet our policy duty. We're not envisaging on that basis an increase in any of our contract prices, because obviously when we set a contract price at the point at which we award, and operators that know then that contract price is the contract price year on year for the length of the contract, and the majority of our contracts are moving to far longer periods of time, like 5 years plus 2 as possible extension. So many of our big bus contracts are 5 years, and the increase then is an annual increase in line with the retail or consumer price index. I always get confused with which one we use, but I will confirm. But they know year on year what their likely contract increase is likely to be. So the only way that they could then change that is by handing back to us those contracts, by giving us a notice of a handback, and then we would go back out to market again, and in which case they may not be successful. So there's a risk to them as well, as there is a risk to us. So we don't predict there be a significant impact on the cost of the individual contracts, but from the perspective of there being 325 of them or thereabouts at the moment, it's likely that there'll be a reduction, and we would look to consolidate some of those contracts as, for example, post 16, if that was a policy proposal that was cabinet accepted, that those sixth formers in our English medium schools would come off the big buses, and that might allow us to run smaller vehicles. So it might be that there's more contracts or more vehicles, but just of a smaller or different type, which may in the same way then reduce costs, as well as limiting the number of contracts. But we don't predict there being significant increases in the contract prices as a result of these policy proposals at this time.
Thanks, Chair. I'm afraid I have to give my apologies and leave the meeting because I've got a funeral to attend, but can I crave your indulgence? I was very optimistic in the end time of the meeting, but I would like to suggest in recommendations that, first of all, I think it's been touched on already, we explore and understand what offer and support is available from other colleges. Secondly, we have referenced our corporate parenting duties, their legal duties, and they're around our care experienced children. I think it would also be very helpful if Cabinet had an update on the way that we discharge those duties in its next meeting in that report, and I'm sure that can be that information can be made available in conjunction with officers in the Children and Family Support Directorate. Thirdly, I think it's been suggested by colleagues that we explore opportunities around supporting those children and young people from disadvantaged families, whether there's some sort of targeted support, means-tested support for those children and young people, because I think there's been recognition that it will affect some families, but not others who do have the means. And then fourthly, I think we've heard at length, haven't we, from the head teacher of my comprehensive school about the potential impact. I know that the report is going to Cabinet very soon, but I do wonder whether it's possible for some analysis to be undertaken, whether that's on the basis of information available on a county borough basis or indeed on a Wales-wide basis of the potential impact on attendance and indeed other educational outcomes of any changes in the proposal. Sorry, there's about 4 or 5 recommendations there, and I know it's next on the agenda, but I really do have to go. Thank you, Chair. Apologies.
Sorry, thank you for your time. Okay, so I think we're going to move next to the conclusions and recommendations. So thank you so much for all our invitees for joining us today. Your contributions have been really helpful, and that has really helped to guide some of what we will be concluding. But thank you. Do we have a short break now, or should we leave it till after the? I think we'll do it after the conclusions and recommendations.
Yeah.
It just makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so thank you. And so those who are on the committee will stay on, and then we will conclude our conclusions and recommendations before we have another break. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so if I invite Rachel to guide us through some of the recommendations that we might be wanting to make.
Thank you, Chair. I think possibly one of the best ways to maybe do this is to see if there's any specific recommendations on the 5 proposals individually, and then I've got some general ones noted down as well. So if I can just go to proposal 1 then and see if there's any comments or recommendations that the committee wish to make in relation to this now to be presented verbally at the Cabinet meeting next week, please.
I've picked up on communication. That would definitely be something that we need to make sure happens so that parents are aware and that even the young people are aware, because people could be choosing schools, etc. Over the summer, and it would impact on them in 2025. Okay, Councillor Amanda Williams.
Thank you very much. Yeah, in the meeting, Councillor Jones said that he would be chairing a group, and I wondered if we could include in there that they are working closely with communities, for example, and street lighting to ensure that if any safe routes to school are areas where there are concerns of delays in cutting back hedges or whatever, that they are dealt with more urgently so that our safe routes remain safe routes.
Yeah, and I think it'd be good to make sure that those safe routes are monitored on a regular basis, not just ignored, and that children and parents know how they can report concerns with their routes. And you mentioned about the lighting on one of those routes. We do need to have a feedback mechanism that the children will know and the parents will know that actually can lead to quick improvements on the safety of their routes. Councillor Frylene Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was on the safety aspect to make sure it's reviewed at least like termly, because obviously the conditions change from term to term, even half termly maybe, if possible.
Okay, so that feeds in with the continuing to monitor the safe routes. Councillor Williams?
Yeah, and we also discussed about the well-being and the wet weather, and for those schools and what they can do in working with schools for those who have to walk 3 miles and then have got split schools, for example, and have to then walk all around all day. They're not in one building. How we keep those children warm and dry. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly on that, I've got a lot noted down in terms of the monitoring working group, so I'll see how to kind of whether to separate that out proposal by proposal or put one whole recommendation on what the committee wants the group to look at, but I've certainly picked up that as well, definitely.
Thank you. Is there any other things that we need to recommend on proposal 1?
One other thing that was mentioned, if members want to include this on that one, and again links in with that group, with the monitoring working group recommendation, as I said, whether it's a general one or just on this proposal, but I think it would be a general one, was it was proposed by a head teacher that it was essential that school leaders are involved with any monitoring and resulting actions with that group. I've also got in terms of that it looks at the public bus issues with pupils waiting around, so that links in with what you were saying about what the group looks at with safe routes, but also in terms of actually how they're looking at the weather conditions and that. That's one of the things I've got there. That's what I've got on proposal 1.
I think as well, we didn't really mention it, but again, it's about working closely with the schools. So if, for example, if they decide that they're going to put a member of support staff, yes, there's a safe route, but I don't know, that going to be a member of staff there, or they're going to try and arrange a walk-in bus. And I just think if a school sets something up and it's good practice, how they share that, you know, all those sorts of things that are, like what you said is, and I'm sure they are working together closely, but it isn't just, oh, the school carry on. We need as much good information being shared around our schools about what works and, you know, just everybody feeling part of it and not just something forced upon them then.
Thank you. And also making sure that the schools are prepared, as you say, so that there are areas where they can dry wet coats and things, because that would be very helpful. Proposal 2.
I haven't got anything specifically in relation to proposal 2 on this one. There was a discussion obviously around other local authorities provision, but as I said, I haven't got any detail as to anything I've picked up on that. No, okay.
Proposal 3. I think just the capacity of Welsh medium and faith schools, would they have enough capacity to cope with parents changing their behaviour because of the policy changes?
Yeah, the only other thing I've got, Chair, is in terms of vulnerable pupils, and again, this could be, you know, part of the monitoring that I'll include in terms of the attendance of vulnerable pupils here, to monitor that closely in terms of nursery provision. And obviously there will be, you know, just for the committee to be aware, obviously I think the nursery provision proposals will be coming in after, or towards the autumn, I think. So as I said, that will need to be taken into consideration then as well. Thank you.
Okay. I think we had the most concerns about proposal 4, which was the removal of all post-16 transport. I think that would be fair to say. What has anyone got any specific recommendations that we want to bring up on that? We obviously had what Councillor Hugh David put forward as well, that can be added. Councillor Amanda Williams?
Yeah, I was concerned with this, that we don't know which bus routes are running near to or past schools. So if we're taking the bus service away, these children will not have access to school. So I would like a recommendation that is looked into. And even if it's the case that one of the bus providers who will be losing a contract or potentially having a reduced contract might have capacity to look at a mopping up bus, like we have some paid buses more locally for schools, such as Bryn Teg. I think there's 2 paid buses go home in the evenings, and having a look at how we can work with local bus companies as well to ensure that there is access. Otherwise, we're not going to see these children going to school.
Thank you. That is a very good point, and I think that would be very much in line with what I would want to recommend, that we work with the local bus companies, that if they can put on a bus journey that actually serves the school. So, for example, if there is a bus put on from Cairo that goes, a public bus that goes from Cairo and stops at the school, picking up on the way, that might help alleviate the problems that they've currently got for children in getting to school. Yeah, that would be but doing it as a public bus rather than as a school bus might help alleviate other issues. If that could be looked at.
Come in on that. The other thing I've got, as I said, what Councillor Hugh David recommended in terms of the exploring what colleges could be able to provide. And again, I've got a mention of the timetable in. So again, that could be something that the group looks at, or as you say, maybe the schools, you know, are considering in terms of, again, shared best practice, particularly in terms of if one school does a really good job in terms of how to get around that issue. That would be something that maybe, because I know members raised that in terms of that. And again, that section also picks up on what Councillor Hugh David said in relation to looking at whether there's any support for means based on means testing. But it was more to do with proposal 5. I think he was talking about that one, but it kind of crosses over a little bit. That was all I had on proposal 4.
Okay, and proposal 5?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Llewellyn Hopkins?
Yeah, it was regarding the means testing. I'd like them to consider a proposal to means test people to decide who can get the free transport, because there are parents, like I said, who can afford to get their children there, and parents who absolutely can't afford it.
Can I come in on that? Thank you, Chair. The only thing I would say on that is, in conversations I've had with officers, is that would be, if to do it across the board for any of these proposals would be an entirely different policy that hasn't been considered, hasn't been consulted on. So I think in terms of what maybe is, looking at the potential for what areas can be mean tested, that's where I think the vulnerable aspect could have been looked at a bit more. But I think, as I said, in terms of actually across the board, any of these changes to look at means testing instead would result in an entirely new policy having to be developed. So I don't think it would be possible to put that forward based on these current proposals. That would be going back to the drawing board basically on the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else on proposal 5 that wants to be? I think we were satisfied that it was an offer rather than something that was compulsory, and I think that helped alleviate quite a few fears about that policy, and that schools will need to work with the parents if they are going to take that up to make sure that it works, that they can drop off safely for the children.
And I've got the disabled access on.
Yeah, and disabled access particularly.
To consider that. Yeah.
Okay.
Any further comments? I think Councillor Amanda Williams.
Okay.
Just the one, please. You had a lot about whether the 45 pence was the right amount. If we just double check that that will cover, because there might be insurance implications for parents who may only have social, domestic and pleasure. They may require commuting on their insurance policy, or business, depending on how they're doing it. So there might be more of an impact, and you might need to look at also whether we would need to ensure that the necessary, if we're paying them, whether we then do the necessary checks that they've got the relevant insurance, because they're taking on something that we would normally deliver ourselves.
That's actually a good point. I know that I have to have business insurance on my car for work-related expenditure, and I have to provide a copy of my certificate of insurance to ensure that. So I don't know whether the local authority would be in the same situation or whether it would be a slightly different arrangement.
I can double check on that, but I imagine it wouldn't be an issue because usually you've got parental guardian responsibility for that child, and that's what the offer's for. It's not for you're not doing it on a business-based perspective. Although we're providing them with that offer of funding, I wouldn't imagine it would be classed as business. But I will definitely clarify.
I think because Robin did say, didn't he, that they already provide that. Some parents already take up that offer, so I would like to think that that had been looked at, but we can ask, can we, if that's what's in place to make sure everything's in place.
And can we have clarification on how the financial payment might be treated by the tax authorities for a start? I think that 45p limit does mean that there's no, you don't pay any tax on it, but also for those households in receipt of benefit, will it have an impact on their benefits? That's something that they need to know, and I think we need to know before we can make that offer to them. Is that everything on recommendations?
Everything that I've got, unless anyone else.
Okay, so I'm going to pause the meeting. I think we're slightly over, but we'll have if we come back at 12:30. So that we can then continue with the meeting with Alex in the chair, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll come back at 12:30.